Okay, to move on to the next broader question then. So we see that each filmmaker has chosen to engage with very specific facts in national history, but not through documentary, but through fictional form. And more specifically, they've chosen a particular narrative and particular characters to focus on, even when in some cases those characters are the actual historical figures, as in your film about Ouija. Nevertheless, in each case, you've made a distinctive artistic choice. This is what I want to focus on in terms of character, in terms of storyline. So the next question to you is, why did you make those particular narrative choices? Why that particular personal story? And even if that story, even if that person happens to be the center point of the history, why those aspects? Why those aspects, for example, of Ouija's story, which doesn't go all the way to the point of his disappearance, but focuses on some other things. So why the particular aspects of fictional narrative that you focus on? And starting again with Green.
Why the characters? Why the narrative?
Yes, why is that particular story that you're telling about that elderly gentleman and his return? Yes. Why is that the important thing to focus on for you?
I think I just mentioned it earlier about the importance of creating fiction, and also I think that the idea of a fiction, most of the time, is made out of what we want to put inside. But I realized that it's also what we have excluded is very important. And the return, the film itself is, I think it's a film about what we have excluded. And in the process of creating a narrative, a national narrative, or a historiography of writing history, we tend to also have to, it's inevitable, I guess, it's part and parcel of the game to exclude certain things. And I think the film is one of the reasons, or one of the things I would like the audience to think about is why we exclude certain things, why we include certain characters in our history, and why is it written by a certain group of people, and how do we, what has it got to do with our assistant, I guess, in a way.
Okay, but I don't want to let you off the hook here. You're beating around the bush a little bit. This is a film about someone who's arrested in the 60s, accused of being a communist. But the film starts, sorry, this is the one where we'll have most of the spoilers. Really worth seeing if you can catch it tonight, a sold-out screening. But the film really starts, he's arrested, and immediately, it's a great elision, he's back home 30 years or 40 years later. And that's the focus. How are things in his life when he gets back? Why do you want to focus on that?
Definitely it's because what happened in the past, and I feel that they had this narrative, this fiction, this character has an impact on what in our lives currently, and also hopefully I think the idea of creating a film or writing a book is that it is a experience. It should be experience, and it should be a transformational experience for the maker and for the creator. And hopefully, this is just a hopefully, that when the audience watch it, they will also begin asking some of these questions, and therefore, I won't say be transformed, but at least there's some kind of shift in their mind. Did I answer your question?
Yes, about making the connection to the current context. Yeah. Thanks. So Edmund, could you talk a little bit about your particular choice of approach to a narrative fiction connected tangentially to the Linus?
Tough question. All right.
Well, you spoke quite a bit about this yesterday in terms of your interest in these characters.
Right.
And
I mean, Reward of Exploding Durians. I mean, in truth, there are for me, there are 4 main characters in the film. That's like the boy, Meng, Hui Ling, Mayan. So there are like three teenagers, 1 teacher. I mean, of course, many people thought that the boy was the audience surrogate, like because he, but it's not like that. In truth, 4 of them are like extensions of myself, which I think usually happens like when you're creating something like all the creatures should be extensions of yourself. So I think they kind of represented me like differently, like maybe from an emotional aspect, I was more like the teenager, but intellectually I was closer to the teacher. I don't think I was interested in exploring the whole Linus controversy from a very documentary point of view. So it was more like a fictionalization of the entire situation. Like I never put in the names. I was quite ambiguous with the town, you know, because I didn't want to restrict myself like by giving something like factually accurate, like you know that. I mean, I don't think I'm really a good documentary filmmaker. I just wanted to tell a story, explore things that I wanted to explore using this real life issues as the backdrop. Because maybe that was it.
So what are some of those things you want to explore, though, in the lives?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, there were some protests going on against the Linus construction, but I couldn't find myself, like, I couldn't take any sides because like I kind of questioned the protesters as well, like what are they doing this for? Like, are they really doing it for the well-being of the villagers? It was kind of demoralizing because when we found that you know the leader of the protest movement, like he's also like part of the opposition group. Like, is he doing this like politically for himself, like politically? So there were all these questions, all these doubts that you know. So I couldn't take any sides. So I was more interested in exploring like what is it like, you know, growing up, like emotionally, like being in such a turbulent situation, like in the past few years of Malaysia, like everyone's protesting, like people dared to voice out their disagreement with the government. Like, what is it like growing up in such a situation when you're at the crossroads of your life? So that's the reason why I had like teenagers as my most of my main characters. Like,
so it lets you look at the personal experience and personal dilemmas in a way that a documentary form would not. Yes, okay, great. And Anocha, with you, this question becomes extremely complex, not with you, but with your film, in that, so well, what do you select as the narrative line? What is the narrative line? It's such an experimental form in terms of how you've approached it.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the fact that the massacre was really is still shrouded in mystery and is so complex, you know, because you know, it has been distorted throughout history and manipulated and in so many ways, and that's why I thought the only way to really uncover some truth about the massacre was actually through fiction. And so the film is you know, I showed the process of making a film and how, in a way, it's very similar how you write history and how you make a film. You know, you exclude a lot of things. You know, you only focus on the things that you want people to know. Cinema is also very manipulated in that sense. So I decided to have 4 main characters played by 6 actors, and there's a character of a filmmaker and a writer activist who's her muse, and then an actor who initially would be like a bridge between, you know, reality and fiction, because actors do that. You know, this is part of what their existence. You know, they have to traverse this bridge all the time. And then there's a character. For me, it's actually a very important character of a young woman who keeps changing her jobs. And I have to say, actually, I started the whole film with her. Yeah. So, on the one hand, I wanted to talk about the massacre and, you know, for lack of a better word, like heroism of the people who are fighting for their ideals, or it's for justice, for democracy. But I didn't want to exclude people who, in some way, like they're common people, who, no matter how much change has been in society in terms of the politics or culture, these people's lives will not be affected. And that's why I actually, this character of the young working class woman is very important, and she punctuates several parts in the film. Yeah.
So for both of you, in very different ways, part of your interest is making sure to keep the personal dimension present, but at the same time, at a more experimental level, yours is also a narrative about the process of constructing narrative in a historical situation where that has become so difficult, if not untenable. Great. Anggi, in your case, again, the film is about the person who is at the center of this history, but you've still made choices about which aspects of Weeji's experience you've decided to represent. So can you talk a little about that? What was your emphasis in the narrative? Why did you choose to tell the story in the way that you did?
I think there is a practical reasons that one of the mission why we made this film is to bring the history to young people with the medium, with the film as a medium. So we put this aim in the first place. There is a lot, maybe like what Anocha is saying, that there is a lot of things that it's not telling in a formal education, that we have a big thing happen in the history that it's like close, like we don't know, and that's why we try to make a more alternative medium to introduce to young people. Maybe it looks very. I'm sure that we don't want to make us as like a what you call, like educator or like a saints that telling something through our film, but this is our initiation as also a young generation, that now we have better system, so we have more space to telling our statement with many kind of things, with film, with the even blog or everything. Back in 20 years ago, it's no way in Indonesia. So it's kind of our responsibility for taking part of the process of telling keep telling the issue that's still going on, and that it still exists, and it can be happen again. So it's kind of a warning that we have a not so good era, and we don't want to go again in the back. So regarding this kind of aims, so we make a film and we make a fictions rather than, let's say, documentary, or we choose the fiction as the way to telling story, because the fiction is maybe more it's easier to young people to get into it rather than documentary. Of course, I don't want to make a what you call it, prejudice that young people in Indonesia doesn't like to watch a documentary or something, but we choose that because it can this film can be showing in a more what you call it, like more places, accessible for everybody. So we start to develop the fiction of Weeji's life, and we choose to make the era that actually it's kind of a door, a door to get into another information after they watch the Solo Solitude, which is actually in the era that people so which is the more solitude era of Vici, not the era that Vici
that he has his fame,
yes.
but what this time of exile. I
Yes,
guess.
so in the time of calm and afraid, we are sure that we can showing the operation by the figure of Vici to the audiences. So that's what we think.
And another interesting commonality that's coming up in the discussion now is the fact that all of you are using the fictional format as a means of making clear the connection between dry historical fact and the present moment, that all of you are using this as a way of drawing those connections.